Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Byblos. As I said in the last video, I'm trying to inspire people to think about Byblos almost as much as they think about the Roman Empire. The audience for my channel probably thinks about the Roman Empire every day. I hope you think about Byblos almost every day. Very profound city. So today we're going to look at the temples. I'll probably break this up into two videos. We're going to look at the temples on the Acropolis. We might talk a little bit about the deities worshipped here, but I don't want to get too lost in a tangent, so we'll probably put that into a second video where we get more into the actual deities and their worship and what they were like and so forth. But we'll start here with the temple of Baalat Gebal. Okay, so this is the hearth goddess of the city, and she takes the name of the city. Remember, Byblos is called Gebal. Well, in modern like Lebanese Arabic, it's like Jebel, but the earlier version of this would be like Gebelos. So she was Baalat of Gebelos. Baalat meaning lady, so lady of Gebelos. And depending on the translation of Gebelos, she is lady of the earth, or lady of the well, or lady of the mountain, or lady of the well god, the mountain god, the earth god. So she is the female companion to whatever father god was worshipped here. But we'll get into her later. Let's just talk about the temple for now. Okay. The Temple of Baalat Gebal was an important Bronze Age temple in the World Heritage Site of Byblos. The temple was dedicated to Baalat Gebal, the goddess of the city of Byblos. And I'll just speak a little bit about her here. Baalat Gebal, also known as Beltu Shagubla and Baltis, was the tutelary goddess of the city of Byblos. While in the past it was often assumed her name was only an epithet, presently research assume that it is a proper name. So yeah, the name is a title. Is it a title? Is it a name? Like Baalat means lady, so lady of Byblos. Is that her name? Is it a title? Is it both? Is it a title that becomes a name? People kind of have different ideas about that, but however you want to interpret that. You're splitting hairs, in my opinion. I don't think that's an important distinction. All right, sorry, I had to cut out there. Guy ran by on his dirt bike. Built around 2800 BC, it was the largest and most important sanctuary in ancient Byblos and is considered one of the first monumental structures of the Syro-Palestinian region. So 2800 BC, that's before the pyramids. This is older than the pyramids. It's only a few hundred years after Egypt itself is unified, after the first dynasty of pharaohs. So we're talking really early on. Older than the Great Pyramids. Imagine that. That's incredibly ancient. And it's around 3000 BC where we start seeing the birth of Canaanite civilization, the construction of permanent like stone structures rather than like mud brick huts and stuff like that. So this is like really like the true beginning of like higher civilization. 2 centuries after the construction of the Temple of Baalat Gebal, the Temple of Obelisks was built approximately 100 meters to the east. This is slightly inaccurate. The Temple of Obelisks is a later layer. I think it's built around 1600 BC. The original temple that was built here 2 centuries after the Temple of Baalat Gebal was the L-shaped temple. And you see it mentioned down here. They're kind of the same thing. The L-shaped temple is the earlier layer, and then the Temple of Obelisk is built on top of that about 1,000 years later. So just to nitpick. The length and continuity of its history as an active temple is remarkable and supports its centrality in the life of the city. An important group of Byblos figurines were found in the temple. These figurines have become the poster child of the Lebanese tourism ministry. These figurines are pretty awesome. Really unique looking figures. So they're approximately 1,500 to 2,000 statuettes found here, primarily in Byblos, or found in Phoenician temples in Lebanon, primarily in Byblos, but also Kamid al-Laz. The statuettes date to the 2nd millennium BC, so 2000 to 1000 BC, and are made of bronze, silver, or copper alloy. The Byblos figurines are considered to represent the best example of their kind across the Levant. Most figurines are found in the Temple of Obelisks, that's the temple to the male deity, in which 20 votive deposits and pictures containing a variety of such figures were found, along with a smaller but important group of them found in the neighboring temple of Balat Gibal. So these are male figurines, well, maybe not all of them, but most of them are male, and they wear these hats that are thought to be crowns. So they're either kings or gods, or depictions of kings and gods. So that might explain why they're more likely found at the Temple of Obelisks, where a male god was worshipped, rather than the Temple of Balat Gibal. But some of them are found here as well. Majority were found at archaeological sites in sealed pottery jars, together with tools, weapons, jewelry, and other ritual objects. The first group found was located at the Temple of Balat Gibal, and information about them was published by our friends Pierre Montet and Maurice Dunon. They come up in every video on Byblos so far. Both originally considered the figurines to be foundation deposits. Following further discoveries at the Temple of Obelisk, Dunon suggested that perhaps they might be assemblages of offering deposits for festivals. In 1966, however, Negbi and Moskowitz suggested instead that the various objects discovered were hidden away in haste ahead of an impending catastrophe. So these figurines may have been... So possibly they were sealed in these jars together with other valuable objects when the city was under threat. And then the temples are destroyed and buried, and then we dig them up and we find these figures. So the statue's 3 to 38 centimeters tall, so about a foot tall, and then mostly represent males and have tangs projecting from their feet, so that just allows them to be placed onto bases, inserted into objects. Most wear cone-shaped hats resembling the labade, which is a conical brimless felt cap traditionally worn by Lebanese people in modern times. So this labade, so the ancestor of the labade may go all the way back to the 2nd millennium BC. While some resemble the Egyptian headjet crown, and others wear helmets. I thought this too. When I saw this, I immediately thought, "Wow, this looks like the headjet crown." So the headjet crown is the white crown of Upper Egypt. Now it's the other crown is the red crown, the Deshret. They will eventually combine the red and white crowns when Egypt is unified. And that happens a few centuries before the Temple of Balat Gibal is built. Now, this is the crown of Lower Egypt, the red one. And Lower Egypt is closer. Lower Egypt is northern Egypt. It's lower because of the altitude, not because of not because it's in the south. Okay, so lower altitude, but it's in the north. So the northern Egypt is closer to Byblos and would have much more contact. So why are they wearing the headjet crown of Upper Egypt, which is farther away? I just thought that was an interesting thing to note. I don't have an answer, but it's almost like they are culturally more similar to Upper Egypt, Southern Egypt, than they are to Northern Egypt. I don't know. It's odd. Signaling an intensification of relations with Egypt during the 12th and 13th dynasties. Some are nude and others wear short kilts. Originally, many were armed with a stick, dagger, mace, or axe. Based on an inscription on a large obelisk at the Temple of Obelisks, the male ones are interpreted to resemble Reshef, the Phoenician deity of war and plague. Reshef may be the deity worshipped at the Temple of Obelisks and the L-shaped temple. There's questions about that. We'll get to that in a minute. But just to give you an idea of who Reshef is, he's a god of war and plague. So think of Hercules as like a son of God, earthly hero king. Mix him with Apollo, the sun god, and then mix him with Ares, the war god. Right? Since people have more familiarity with Greek gods than Levantine gods, that to understand Reshef, just mix Hercules, Apollo, and Ares together in a blender, and that's Reshef. The figures are described as crude, stereotyped, mass-produced. Ritual offerings. They are interpreted as votive offerings because they were not found in graves and were not dispersed widely enough to be part of exchange networks. The Lebanese archaeologist Maurice Chehab. So finally we get a Lebanese name. I mean, the first name is still French, but Emir Maurice Hafez Chehab was a Lebanese archaeologist and museum curator. He was the head of the Antiquities Service in Lebanon and curator of the National Museum of Beirut from 1942 to 1982. He was recognized as the father of modern Lebanese archaeology. So Dunan and Monte, they do like the initial excavations. This guy is a more modern figure from Lebanon. So he formulated a suggestive hypothesis about the figurines, saying that a good number of statuettes placed in these vases are depicted in full motion and wearing the lebade, or conical cap, which is still in use in certain regions of Lebanese high mountains. These headdresses were, this headdress was held on the head by a chin strap. One of the X photos includes several dozen of the statuettes, so similar that one can imagine that they represented a troop that would have offered their sponsors effigies to the temple before embarking. So let's just take a look at some of these photos. So like I said, an Egyptian crown from southern Egypt. Odd. And, you can see like they look Egyptian. They're even in this Egyptian pose. This is a very common pose found in Egypt with the left foot forward. There's different ideas of why the Egyptians put the left foot forward on their statues. In many ancient cultures, left-handedness or leftness was considered wrong. Most people are right-handed. Like the vast majority are right-handed. So whenever you found a left-handed person, it was like, well, why are you different? You're disordered. There's something wrong with you. So left got associated with evil or disorder, sin. In Latin, the word left is sinestros, which is where we get our word for sinister. So there's something, if he's standing with his left foot forward, that means his weight is on his right leg, his right foot. And so one idea that scholars have is that by standing left foot forward places your weight on the right foot, which is ordered. So it's you're standing on truth and order. So that's an idea. We don't know, but that's one main idea that comes up for explaining this pose. But yeah, they're standing left foot forward, all of them. So very Egyptian inspired, wearing the headdresses, striking an Egyptian pose. You can see some of these are the conical caps. And this one's female, so they're not all male. More conical caps. So yeah, pretty strange that it's. And this is totally an Egyptian crown. Even the little doohickeys they got on the side and the front, that's exactly how the crown is portrayed in Egyptian art and how we find it. So just and this one is seated, which is another indication of either a king or a deity. So yeah, there's a lot of these little figurines found. So just showing you that. So back to the Temple of Balat Gibal. Sorry for that little tangent, but I thought those figurines are pretty cool, and it shows a lot of the culture, and again, it emphasizes the Egyptian connection. So back to the Temple of Balat Gibal. The temple and its patroness, Balat Gibal, were venerated in the city for more than 2 millennia during the Canaanite and Phoenician eras. It was constructed when Byblos had close ties with Egypt, and a number of Egyptian references are found throughout the temple complex. The temple itself was expanded a number of times and remained in use until the Roman era. The Romans eventually conquer this place, and guess who conquers it? Pompey the Great. And if you know anything about Roman history, that's the friend and ally and eventually rival of Julius Caesar. So he's the one. Pompey the Great is the one that conquers Byblos. So it's amazing how connected all these ancient societies are. The site of the temple is near the Crusaders' Byblos Castle because, again, this area has many layers of civilization. Very old city. and was first excavated, I already said this, Monte, Dunan, there they are again. Sketches of excavations. Almost all of the artifacts found in the excavation of the temple are displayed in the National Museum of Beirut. The temple now sits east of the Roman Theater, which I think we looked at that in the last video. That's on top of the Royal Necropolis, or near it. The theater, built around 218, was reconstructed and moved to allow the excavation of the temple site. And here it is. Oh, so this is really interesting. Well, first let me look at this. So this is the temple. So this is the temple itself, and this is the enclosure. If we go forward, so this is a coin. It's the only surviving depiction of the temple in use, and it's from the time of Macrinus, which is second, around 217 to 218 A.D. So 200 A.D. And we get a picture of the temple, the only known picture of the temple when it was fully constructed. You get a little portico area with a staircase up front. We get this back section. The roof seems to be peeled away on this coin to show inside, maybe to show the altar itself. And there's also, it seems to be like a little side entrance to the altar. I'm not an expert on Levantine temples. I do know that the Greeks have a two-room temple system, where the front room, which would, I guess, correspond with this, is often like a treasury. That's how the Parthenon in Athens. There's a front room, which is the treasury. So the front of the temple is not the shrine in Greek, in the Greek tradition at least. And then you go around the back, and then you enter the back door of the temple, and that's where you see the statue of Athena and all that. So maybe something similar here, where the back is actually the altar, and then the front is something else. Here's some drawings of the excavation. I want to make one other note. In the last video, I mentioned how the burials were under the Temple of Resheph. But after looking at this again, that is only true of the regular necropolis, of the Byblos elite. The royal necropolis actually extends towards the Temple of Baalat Gebal. So royalty buried closer to the goddess, and the lesser elite buried closer to the god. So that's an interesting thing to note. So this is the L-shaped and Temple of Obelisks, and this is the Baalat Gebal temple. And then back to the figurines. And there's the flag of Lebanon with the cedar tree on it. All right, so now let's go talk about the Temple of Obelisks. So the Temple of Obelisks, also known as the L-shaped temple and Temple of Resheph, was an important Bronze Age temple structure in the World Heritage Site of Byblos. Is considered perhaps the most spectacular of the ancient structures of Byblos. It is the best preserved building in the Byblos archaeological site. But the reason that is because the Temple of Obelisks is built 1,000 years after the L-shaped temple, which itself was built a couple hundred years after the Temple of Baalat Gebal. So the Temple of Baalat Gebal, while the largest, is not the most elaborate. It's definitely not the most well preserved. So that would be the Temple of Obelisks. Almost all of the artifacts found in the excavation of the temple are displayed at the National Museum of Beirut. I'm just repeating a lot of this stuff. More of the mention of the Byblos figurines. So here's the two layers. So the base is the L-shaped temple. The L-shaped temple was constructed around 2600 BC, so 200 years or so after the temple. 2 centuries after the construction of Baalat Gebal, or the Temple of Baalat Gebal, 100 meters to the west. It was named the L-shaped temple by Dunan, as its 2 rooms and the courtyard were arranged in such a shape. There's the 2-room concept again. And they named it L-shaped because they don't know who's worshipped here. There's ideas, but they don't really know. The temple had well-built walls and temples in contrast to the later obelisk temple. It is thought that the L-shaped temple was burned down at the end of the early Bronze Age. And then so after it gets burned down, you get the Temple of Obelisks. The Temple of Obelisks was constructed around 1600 BC on top of the L-shaped temple, retaining its general outline. The temple's name, given by Dunan, refers to a number of obelisks and standing stones located in a court around the Cella? I don't know how to pronounce that. Since it had been built on top of the L-shaped temple, it was necessary for Dunan to dismantle and move this upper temple in order to excavate underneath. So yeah, they relocated it so that so that they could excavate both, and so also so that tourists can go to both. It does mean that you altered the site, which is bad, but at least you get to enjoy both layers of history. In contrast to the L-shaped temple, the obelisk temple was built with irregular walls. Among the significant discoveries within the temple was that of the Abishemu obelisk, a limestone obelisk created around 1800 BC commemorating the Phoenician king Abishemu of Byblos. Written in Egyptian hieroglyphs, it includes an inscription which scholars have identified as a dedication to Harishef, an Egyptian deity, whose appearance here tied to a Canaanite context is widely interpreted, though debated, as the Egyptian syncretic form of the Canaanite war god Reshef. So some people think both this L-shaped temple and obelisk temple is dedicated to Reshef. They even call this temple the Temple of Reshef sometimes. But that's debated. The actual Egyptian inscription is Harishef, but Harishef is an Egyptian deity, and so they looked for a Levantine version of that deity or an equivalent of that deity, and they settled on Reshef. It's debatable of whether that's the intent. Harishef is equated with Hercules in Greek mythology, but he's also identified with Ra and Osiris. So kind of think of like, if we're trying to figure out what the deity was like, take Hercules, take a sun god like Apollo or Ra in this case, since this is the Egyptian version. So and Harishef was also associated with Osiris, so that would indicate death and judgment. We talked in the first video on my Byblos playlist about how Osiris is identified with this city as well. He's linked to this city, Osiris and his wife Isis. So that kind of gives you an idea. So a sun god, judgment of the dead, that kind of, and a war god. An interesting figure we don't really know. And the fact that so many obelisks were found here, just to give a little bit more context to that. In Egyptian mythology, an obelisk represents the ray of light, the ray of Ra's light, God's light. So Father God shining down on you. And the top of the obelisk is a pyramid, the point of the ray of light. And again, like the pyramid itself, it represents the Ben stone. So it represents the primordial mound of earth and a ray of light. So a ray of light that has become been turned into stone and representing the Ben stone at the same time as representing a ray of light, which is just like the pyramids. Very similar spiritual motif, mixing ray of light symbolism and primordial earth mound symbolism. So ray of light shining down onto the earth. And then these obelisks would have inscriptions on them, or sometimes like curses or blessings, or prayers to different gods or kings, because they often would deify or semi-deify their kings. So, or their kings were often thought to be earthly representations of their gods. So the fact that so many obelisks are here and there's these Egyptian inscriptions is very interesting. And yet again, it shows how connected these societies were. The fact that a Phoenician king in 1800 BC is writing his inscription in Egyptian hieroglyphs, that tells you something. I mean, this is profoundly linked with Egypt, but we have a way of possibly understanding these deities better, even though scholars still debate exactly the form of the deities here, especially this male deity. We can kind of get an idea. We have the Stele of Katesh, which links Egyptian and Canaanite deities and mythology, and that might give us an insight into the deities worshipped here at Byblos. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the Stele of Katesh a bit, and I'm going to expand on some possible ideas of the god and goddess worshipped here at Byblos. So join me next time, and we'll think about Byblos some more.